Imagine walking into a car dealership, ready to browse the latest BMW, Mercedes, or Audi. Now imagine finding out that the very brands you trusted for luxury and innovation are suddenly disappearing from American roads. That's exactly what's happening right now. German automotive giants, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi, are retreating from the United States market. And the reason is clear. President Donald Trump's sudden 25% tariffs on imported vehicles and parts. This isn't just a story about cars. It's about jobs being thrown into uncertainty, supply chains breaking apart, and decades of global partnerships suddenly under strain. Every plant, every dealership, every supplier is caught in the shockwave. Factories built over years of careful planning are facing choices no business wants to make: raise prices, take losses, or simply step back. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore why these automakers are leaving, how it's affecting communities across the United States, and what it means for the global automotive landscape. Who is paying the price for these tariffs? And is there any road back? Stick with me, because the answers are more surprising than you might think. It all started with a single sudden policy. President Trump imposed a 25% tariff on imported vehicles and parts. No negotiation, no warning, just a hard line. If you don't produce here, you can't sell here. For German automakers, this was a financial shockwave. Take BMW, for example. Their Spartanburg plant in South Carolina produces thousands of SUVs every year, but it still relies heavily on imported engines and parts from Germany and Mexico. Mercedes-Benz's Tuscaloosa facility faces a similar problem, especially with high-value components that can't easily be sourced locally. And then there's Audi, which is almost entirely reliant on imports, suddenly staring down tariffs that could reach as high as 200% on some models. Overnight, the math didn't add up. Raise prices and risk losing customers, absorb the costs, and suffer massive losses. This wasn't just a financial problem, it was a strategic nightmare. Global supply chains, years in the making, began to fray. Components that traveled across continents to create a single car suddenly became liabilities. Factories, managers, and engineers had to confront a harsh reality. The ground beneath their operations was shifting, and fast. What started as a political move quickly became a full-blown business crisis, setting the stage for the dramatic responses that would follow. When the tariffs hit, German automakers didn't have the luxury of time. This wasn't a minor adjustment or a gradual reshuffle. They reacted like pilots pulling an emergency brake on a runaway train. BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi all paused shipments, delayed deliveries, and shelved expansion plans that had been in motion for years. Factories went into crisis mode, with managers scrambling to figure out how to keep operations afloat while costs soared. Imagine an intricate domino setup, each piece representing a plant, supplier, or logistics hub. One wrong move, and the entire system could collapse. That's exactly what these companies faced. Audi, for example, couldn't simply replace imported engines or electronics overnight. BMW's Spartanburg plant had to rethink parts sourcing and inventory, while Mercedes paused shipments from Tuscaloosa, leaving dealerships and suppliers scrambling for answers. The tension wasn't just financial, it was human. Engineers, logistics managers, and factory workers suddenly faced uncertainty about schedules, projects, and even jobs. Decisions had to be made fast: absorb the massive costs, pass them to customers, or retreat entirely. In the end, the German giants chose survival strategies that looked like full-scale exit maneuvers, rather than careful recalibrations. Factories weren't just slowing down, they were bracing for a storm that could reshape the entire American automotive landscape. This rapid retreat was a warning. A single policy can ripple across continents, disrupting complex systems built over decades. And as the dust settled, the economic shockwaves began to hit American communities, dealerships, and suppliers. The next chapter in this unfolding story. The German automakers' retreat didn't just shake factories, it sent shockwaves across entire communities. Take BMW's Spartanburg plant in South Carolina. It directly supports around 43,000 jobs and pumps roughly $26 billion into the local economy every year. When production slowed or expansion plans were shelved, the impact rippled far beyond assembly lines. Local suppliers that produced engines, electronics, and specialized parts suddenly faced canceled orders. Small businesses that relied on factory employees as customers, restaurants, repair shops, and retailers, felt the pinch immediately. The effect was like tossing a boulder into a calm lake. The ripples reached far beyond the point of impact. Dealerships were another front line in the fallout. Cars became harder to get, prices started to fluctuate, and warranties and service schedules were thrown into uncertainty. Sales staff faced frustrated customers, unsure how to explain delays or higher prices. Parts distributors scrambled to keep up with inconsistent shipments, while some smaller dealerships struggled just to stay open. Even areas not directly hosting a factory felt the stress because the United States auto supply chain is a tightly connected web. When one link breaks, the strain spreads rapidly. Then came the broader, harder-to-see consequences. Over 2,500 United States suppliers, many of them small and mid-sized businesses, suddenly faced canceled orders or reduced demand. Some companies had to lay off workers, others scrambled to diversify or relocate. The very policy designed to protect American jobs ended up threatening them. Communities that had relied on decades of investment, skill building, and industrial stability now had to navigate sudden uncertainty. And as the American auto landscape shook, it became clear. The repercussions were bigger, deeper, and longer lasting than anyone could have predicted. The impact of the German automakers' exit extended far beyond local communities. It hit the national auto industry and United States exports hard. Vehicles like the BMW X5 and X6, built in South Carolina for international markets, suddenly faced declining demand and soaring costs due to tariffs. Analysts estimate that United States auto exports could fall by as much as $15 billion, a huge blow to an industry that has long relied on overseas markets to sustain growth and innovation. The ripple effect didn't stop there. The total cost to the United States auto sector, including lost sales, delayed projects, and supply chain disruptions, could reach an eye-popping $45 billion. The situation created an ironic twist. Tariffs meant to punish foreign imports ended up dismantling American competitiveness and prestige. Suppliers and manufacturers that had built decades-long partnerships with German brands were left in limbo. Specialized components, software platforms, and hybrid technologies, once proudly produced or assembled in the United States, now faced uncertain futures. This disruption wasn't just about dollars. It was about technological leadership and global influence, both of which were slipping away as automakers reconsidered their investments. For consumers and the wider industry, the message was clear: abrupt trade policies can backfire. Instead of strengthening the United States auto market, the tariffs created instability, delayed production, and reduced export potential. American automakers, dealers, and suppliers were now facing a tough reality. Competitiveness could no longer rely solely on domestic protection. The stage was set for German companies to pivot abroad, while the United States grappled with lost opportunities, both economically and technologically. While the United States market became increasingly risky, German automakers found a lifeline halfway across the world: China. BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi wasted no time redirecting their focus to the world's largest automotive market. BMW began building a massive new factory in Chengdu, designed to produce SUVs and next-generation electric vehicles at scale. Mercedes announced that its next-generation EV platform would debut in China, not the United States, while Audi partnered with major Chinese tech companies and established R&D centers in Shanghai and Shenzhen. China offered stability that the United States suddenly could not. The government provided incentives for EV production, clear policies on foreign investment, and access to a rapidly growing consumer base hungry for luxury vehicles. For German companies, it was not just about producing cars. It was about securing a predictable environment where planning for years ahead was possible. The contrast was stark. In the United States, tariffs and uncertainty dominated. In China, the road ahead was smooth, with a green light to innovate and expand. The strategic consequences are profound. By relocating production, R&D, and even design initiatives to China, Germany is effectively shifting the center of global automotive innovation. The next generation of luxury EVs may be designed, developed, and manufactured almost entirely outside the United States. This represents a loss of influence, leadership, and technological clout for America, while China gains a turbocharged advantage in the race for EV dominance. What started as a policy decision in Washington quickly became a turning point in the global automotive landscape. The shift to China wasn't just about where cars are built, it's about where they are imagined, designed, and engineered. BMW, Mercedes, and Audi are moving design centers, R&D labs, and even autonomous vehicle software development out of the United States. The next generation of German vehicles may now be conceived entirely overseas, from concept sketches to final production. This is more than a factory move. It's a transfer of innovation. For American automakers and engineers, this is a wake-up call. Decades of know-how, collaboration, and supplier networks are being disrupted. When technology hubs and design centers relocate, the United States loses not only jobs, but the intellectual capital that fuels future breakthroughs. Germany's expertise in hybrid platforms, autonomous systems, and EV innovation is now increasingly concentrated in China, giving Beijing a significant advantage in the race for next-generation vehicles. The long-term consequences are clear. While American plants still produce cars, the cutting-edge development, the part that defines global leadership, is happening elsewhere. Consumers may notice it as better technology and smarter vehicles coming from abroad, while United States automakers scramble to catch up. In essence, Germany's retreat isn't just a market shift, it's a transfer of the global automotive brainpower, leaving the United States with production capacity but a shrinking innovation footprint. At first glance, the German exit might have looked like an opportunity for Detroit's automakers. Less competition, more market share. But the reality was far more complicated. American companies like Ford, GM, and Stellantis are heavily reliant on imported components themselves, including electronic modules, batteries, and ECUs. The same tariffs that drove German brands away also raised costs for domestic manufacturers, forcing them to absorb billions in unexpected expenses. Ford alone estimates a $1.5 billion hit from tariff-related disruptions. Without German competition, Detroit faces another challenge: innovation pressure. Mercedes pushed infotainment systems, BMW advanced hybrid platforms, and Audi led in autonomous driving technologies. That rivalry forced U.S. automakers to innovate rapidly. With the Germans retreating, the pressure to stay cutting-edge diminishes, creating a real risk of stagnation in premium and tech-driven segments. Cadillac and Lincoln are attempting to fill the gap, but replicating decades of German engineering prestige isn't something achieved overnight. It's a generational challenge. The consequences ripple through supply chains and jobs. Suppliers tied to domestic automakers now face delays, layoffs, and the uncertainty of stalled product launches. Vehicle prices may rise, new model introductions slow, and research and development pipelines get disrupted. What was intended to protect American jobs and strengthen domestic industry now risks weakening the very foundation it sought to defend. Detroit's dilemma illustrates that trade policy is only as effective as the broader ecosystem it interacts with, and abrupt shifts can create unintended challenges even for homegrown giants. For American car buyers, the German pullout is more than an abstract business story. It hits directly in their wallets and choices. Luxury SUVs and sedans, once plentiful on dealership lots, are suddenly harder to find. Prices rise as automakers try to absorb tariff costs or pass them on to consumers. For families and enthusiasts alike, buying a car becomes a more complicated, expensive, and uncertain process. Dealerships are scrambling to adjust. Service schedules, warranties, and parts availability are thrown into question. Salespeople must explain delays or higher prices to frustrated customers, while parts distributors face irregular shipments. Even everyday repairs become a challenge when components are scarce. What should have been a seamless car buying or service experience now feels like navigating a maze. The broader economic effect is subtle but significant. Fewer affordable luxury cars in circulation can shift consumer demand toward used vehicles or alternative brands, impacting market dynamics. Middle-class buyers may delay upgrades, affecting financing, insurance, and local sales taxes. In essence, tariffs intended to protect American jobs end up creating a ripple effect that touches families, dealerships, and small businesses alike, showing how trade decisions can reshape everyday life far beyond Washington. The tariffs didn't go unnoticed in Europe. Germany and the broader European Union saw Trump's 25% import duties as a direct strike against one of their most critical industries. Automotive exports make up a significant portion of Germany's GDP, with over 3 million cars shipped abroad last year, many to the United States. In response, Brussels began drafting retaliatory tariffs, signaling that trade tensions could escalate into a full-blown standoff. The ripple effects extend beyond just Germany. Other European nations are, reconsidering deals with the United States, negotiating selective agreements to protect their industries. Trade uncertainty has spread like potholes across a global highway. Every shipment, every contract, every investment faces potential disruption. Companies now have to weigh not just domestic policies, but also the possibility of retaliatory tariffs, added costs, and geopolitical friction. For U.S. automakers, the global trade environment is shifting beneath their feet. The old strategy of buy parts cheaply from anywhere is giving way to produce where policy is predictable. Supply chains are recalibrating, and strategic partnerships are being reassessed. The consequence is clear. Global trade is no longer just a background factor. It's a core part of every production and investment decision. What began as a domestic policy now carries global ramifications, forcing the U.S. industry to adapt or risk falling behind in a rapidly changing world. The German automakers' retreat has accelerated a major shift in global supply chains. Components, innovation, and manufacturing are increasingly moving to Asia, particularly China, where production is more stable and predictable. BMW, Mercedes, and Audi are not just building factories. They're relocating research and development centers, design hubs, and autonomous vehicle technology. This shift reflects a new reality. Global production is no longer about finding the cheapest labor. It's about minimizing risk and ensuring consistent output. For U.S. ports, suppliers, and manufacturers, this is a wake-up call. Parts that once traveled from Germany or Slovakia are now sourced closer to Asia's manufacturing hubs. Suppliers in Ohio, Michigan, and California face canceled contracts or the need to quickly adapt to a more fragmented international supply network. Regional production hubs can help, but they rarely match the efficiency, scale, and cost-effectiveness of established global networks. The long-term implications are significant. U.S. automakers may see some reshoring, but it won't compensate for the global scale of production shifting overseas. Strategic control, innovation pipelines, and advanced technologies are increasingly concentrated abroad. In essence, policy decisions that disrupt global trade don't just affect prices. They reshape the geography of manufacturing, innovation, and competitive advantage. For the United States, the challenge is to stabilize domestic supply chains while remaining competitive in an industry where leadership is increasingly global. The German automakers' exit offers a stark lesson. Abrupt trade policies can backfire. Tariffs designed to protect American jobs and industries ended up creating instability, driving innovation and production overseas, and weakening domestic competitiveness. This shows that isolationist measures rarely create strength. They often isolate the very companies and workers they intend to protect. Trade and industrial policy must account for the full ecosystem. Supply chains, technology development, international partnerships, and consumer demand are tightly intertwined. A sudden policy shift, like a 25% tariff on imported vehicles, doesn't just change prices. It destabilizes years of planning, investment, and trust. When decision-making ignores these factors, the fallout can ripple across industries, communities, and even national prestige. The takeaway is clear. Protecting industry requires strategy, foresight, and negotiation, not shock tactics. Policymakers and companies must plan for stability, predictability, and collaboration. For the United States, the lesson is that abrupt disruption can create temporary headlines but long-term consequences. To remain competitive, the focus should be on fostering innovation, securing reliable supply chains, and engaging global markets thoughtfully, lessons that apply far beyond the automotive sector. The departure of BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi from the United States market is more than a story about cars. It's a symbol of fractured policy, lost prestige, and a shifting global balance in automotive innovation. The U.S. auto industry now faces a clear challenge: stabilize supply chains, invest in cutting-edge technology, and adapt to a global market where competitors are not just other domestic brands, but powerful international players. For policymakers, the lesson is equally urgent. Sudden, heavy-handed tariffs may grab headlines, but they can undermine long-term competitiveness and diminish the country's influence in global industries. Instead, strategic planning, predictable trade policies, and international collaboration are essential to maintain leadership, protect jobs, and keep innovation thriving on American soil. For consumers and car enthusiasts, this is a pivotal moment. Will domestic brands rise to fill the luxury gap left by German automakers? Can the United States regain its role as a global leader in automotive innovation? The answers will unfold in the coming years, And your perspective matters. Think about the cars you drive, the technologies you value, and the policies shaping the roads ahead. The automotive future is at a crossroads, and the choices made now will determine whether the United States leads, follows, or falls behind.